Human beings have existed for 300,000 years and have managed to live in many unstable environments. Over time, we have faced and adapted to extreme conditions, including ice ages, devastating pandemics, and destructive world wars. Our resilience and ability to adapt have allowed us to thrive despite these challenges. But what if we had to survive even further back in time? Imagine traveling back not just thousands or millions of years, but 400 million years ago, to a world that looks nothing like the one we know today. At this time, deadly marine life dominated the oceans, and creatures on land were practically non-existent. The Earth was a vastly different place, with unfamiliar landscapes, strange creatures, and an atmosphere that might not have been as welcoming to human life. Could we survive in such a world? Now, let's say your what-if time machine suddenly malfunctions and breaks down right at this moment, trapping you in the Devonian period. This is what if, and here's what would happen. Fortunately, your time machine lands you on solid ground rather than in the middle of the ocean. That's already a lucky break because, at this point in time, about 85% of the Earth was covered in water. There were only two massive landmasses, supercontinents, that existed during this period. To understand how life evolved in this period, we have to go back even further. Around 600 million years ago, one of these supercontinents, Gondwana, had an enormous mountain range similar to today's Himalayas. Over millions of years, these mountains slowly eroded, and the sediments washed into the oceans. These sediments carried nutrients that allowed marine life to flourish, setting the stage for the Devonian period, a time often called the Age of Fishes due to the explosion of aquatic life. Now that we have some background, our first priority for survival would be to find shelter. Unfortunately, in the early Devonian period, trees and plants as we know them today had not yet evolved. Instead, the landscape was barren, resembling Mars, with only moss covering parts of the land. This means finding or building a proper shelter would be extremely difficult. You'd have to get very creative, perhaps using piles of moss, rocks, or whatever you could scavenge to construct a crude dwelling. Since human civilization evolved in a world full of plants, textiles, and animals for clothing, being transported to the Devonian would present an entirely new challenge. What would you wear? There would be no wool, cotton, or even animal hides to make clothes from. If humans had actually evolved in this period, we might have been completely naked or forced to create makeshift garments from moss, seashells, and fish bones. Who knows, maybe we'd even start a new fashion trend, Devonian chic. While shelter and clothing are essential, food would be an even bigger concern. If you attempted to catch fish for food, you'd have to be very cautious. Many of the sea creatures in this era were far deadlier than anything in today's oceans. One of the most terrifying predators was the placoderm, an armored fish with enormous, razor-sharp jaws. These apex predators could grow up to 10 meters, 33 feet, long and could easily turn you into a snack. Let's say you somehow managed to catch a fish without being eaten in the process. How would you cook it? With no trees for firewood, finding fuel would be extremely difficult. Your best option might be gathering very dry moss and trying to start a fire by rubbing stones together. Even if you managed to make a fire, there would be very little kindling to keep it burning. Given these difficulties, you might be better off sticking to a diet of raw mollusks and arthropods, assuming your stomach could handle it. Finding food would also mean constantly moving around to search for edible critters. Unlike in modern times, where humans have stable food sources, in the Devonian period, you would have to travel continuously to find sustenance. This would require a lot of energy, making survival even more exhausting. If this existence sounds bleak, let's fast forward 40 million years to the late Devonian period. This era is often called the Late Devonian Extinction, one of the planet's 5 major mass extinctions. But don't worry. For you, this might actually be a good thing. By this point, nearly 79% to 87% of all species had been wiped out, meaning there would be far fewer predators to worry about. What could have caused such a catastrophe? Science